There we go. So I'm just going to do a little intro for anyone watching this. This is going to go on the Sonic Nomads YouTube channel, the Muso website. We'll also be using some of this on the Crash the 90s group, which is a celebration of 90s rave culture, which some of your music touches on. I'm just going to just read the bit off the press release. We don't normally bother with press releases because they're normally just full of blurb, but it's quite a good intro just about why we're talking today. So I'm just going to say, Jah Wobble, yourself, and the Invaders of the Heart embark on their autumn tour in the coming weeks, which includes three Southwest dates at Exeter Cavern, 5th of November, Bideford Palladium, 7th of November, Truro Old Bakery, 8th of November. And the tour will see Wobble, yourself, play his legendary 2 hour plus show, taking material from the first two PIL albums, alongside his many collaborations, a range of unexpected covers, and the illustrious anecdotes and repartee. He's also likely to regale us with this. I was intrigued by this, with Shakespearean passages beneath the maelstrom of bass. So I'm gonna. We could touch on some of that later.
That's a new. That's a new press release.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, that's quite new. Whoever's done that.
I,
It must be Ian. Ian must have done
yeah,
that.
I did like
I
it.
quite like the sound of it. You know.
It was quite succinct and it wasn't too waffly. And a lot of press releases they'll be like, "This is the best thing ever," and
Yeah.
it just cuts it out. It says, "This is what you're going to expect." So I'm going to kick off now. Do I call you John? Do I call you
Oh, you
John?
thought John's fine.
John, yeah. So first question, just to ease us into this, if anyone's maybe not familiar with yourself as an artist, you've had a lot of success. You've had a lot of releases. I mean, I look on Discogs, there's about 61 albums and more besides singles. But it's fair to say you're not really sort of mainstream, but you've always been there and often propping up the bass section of other bands that people will know about. So maybe that's the whole thing about a bass player. They're more in the background, but certainly pivotal to a lot of bands. Do you think that John Wardle would have resonated as well with the music buying public as Jah Wobble? Do you think your career would have been different if you'd gone by your real name rather than this nickname that Sid Vicious had accidentally given you when he?
Oh, well, I bet I would have ended up with a nickname anyway. I think that was
Yeah,
that era. But it was a wise thing I did. I think saying to Sid, I'm going to keep that. We all both drunk. So I said people won't forget that. So I remembered it. That's about all I remembered was we were trying to get into a flat to stay the night after drinking heavily, and we couldn't get in the flat anyway. In the middle of trying to get in like a pair of old drunks to get through this, I mean, we never did. We had to go somewhere else. I think we probably had the wrong key in retrospect. Anyway, the other thing I remember for the night was yeah, he called me that, and I said I'm gonna keep that. I'm gonna remember that, Sid. That's great, you know.
I suppose it's in keeping with the punk aesthetic, Sid Vicious, Johnny Rotten, Joe Wobble. It helped, having a name like that obviously just made sense at the time, I'm sure. So going on to the band that you're touring with at the moment, the Invaders of the Heart. I did have a look online. I must confess, I am a vinyl collector. I don't have any of your records. And I was surprised to see that you've released a lot with that band, and had a chart hit in the early '90s with Sinead O'Connor. So I think it's fair to say there's a bit of a world music influence with Invaders of the Heart. What would you say your introduction to world music was? What turned you on to that as a genre?
It was very simple. Answer to that. I used to listen to shortwave radio to help me sleep. Not any stations, just the static, the oscillations of shortwave, which I really loved at that time. And whilst doing that, it kind of, because shortwave moves about a little bit, it oscillates and moves about. Before you know it, you can suddenly hear some Arabic singing. It was a singer I found out a while later called Kassoum, Egyptian singer, performing Egyptian opera, and that was probably like the first, you could call kind of world music, I suppose. I heard, and I think Radio Tehran was another one as well, and I think that was looking back was probably like a form of Sufi music that I heard, and I was captivated by that. And I always liked the idea of I come out the East End, it's the port of London. So there was a seafaring tradition. So you're kind of drawn to travel and to other cultures. I'm still like that. I like the food. I'm still very interested in music. So that was very young. I was a teenager. So I was very, and then I wanted to get elements of that into my music. So that was happening. But the first Invaders of the Heart was formed around about 1981, 82. So all the way back then, we were putting in Middle Eastern sorts modes and stuff. And that's continued more and more in the intervening, I don't know, was it 50 years or something, I suppose, getting on for?
Um, so I'm just trying to look at the questions I've written and trying to make them kind of chronological. We might be able to sort of jump about just to make it kind of a bit more
Yeah, no problem.
logical. But I suppose I don't want to spend too much time talking about PIL and John Lydon because you're not here to promote John. And but it was obviously a big part of your career. So I mean, looking back at your time with PIL, the first two albums, which was what, 78, 79,
Yes.
is obviously an important part of your career. Do you think, how do you think that experience kind of shaped your musical journey going
It
forward?
was, well, it was the beginning. If it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't have had a career in music. So Peel set me up. So I was friends with John before punk. We were mates. He was older than me. And he got into the Sex Pistols. So I saw that from the beginning. I was never really interested in playing in punk bands. I thought punk music was quite conservative. You had this movement that was supposedly very sort of radical and extreme, but the music was like very conservative, kind of too called rock and roll. So when he formed Peel, I played a bit of bass and could really and bring something to the table. I think he was probably shocked how much I brought to the table. I think everybody was, including me, because when I picked the bass up, I really had a clear idea of what I wanted to do with it. I never felt strange about it. I felt very empowered picking the bass up, I suppose would be the word. So, and we made what was quite a radical album with Metal Box, which, people love to this day. And that kind of set me up really. So, and then I went out into the world and left Peel after that groundbreaking album. Went to work with Can, with Holger Zuka and Jackie Libazay. So we did How Much Are They? So can you imagine that? You leave Peel and now you go to work with Holger Zuka and Jackie Libazay. That was pretty incredible. So
It opened doors.
I think more than open doors, it give you a solid basis to work from. And I still feel like that with it. That hasn't changed. It gave a very solid basis, and in fact, I returned to it. A few years ago. I wouldn't have done it in the 90s or early 90s, but I started to want to go back and reapproach some of those compositions from Metal Box. If compositions is the right word, it's quite an extreme sort of album. So it was no, it was that's a great album, and as it was the basis of, it really set me up, gave me a very solid basis to work from. And from that, I could go into more of a world music area, working with Can. And then I ended up working with jazz people even. So when we done Redux, which was an anthology, so I'd already done an anthology. And then I never ever thought I'd do an anthology, and I did a second anthology, and there's been a third and a fourth, I think now. But anyway, the second anthology was a big one, and that was the easiest way to do it, was to split it into genres. So I ended up going into doing ambient stuff, rave, which would probably apply to you, rave stuff, working with DJs, people like Andy Weatherall, going into the late 80s, early 90s, and so dance kind of stuff, rave sort of stuff, jazz, working with people like Bill Laswell, Bernie Worrell, Mills Petter Mulvar over the years, Nils Petter Mulvar, um, Evan Parker, Harry Beckett, so doing a lot of jazz stuff as well as dub, itself, working with dub and then reggae. So the last couple of years, I made two albums. This last couple of years, one with Ken Booth, famous Jamaican singer, and Horace Andy, another
Yeah.
well-known Jamaican singer. So there's a lot of genres, but it all goes back to that very naive basis, very solid basis appeal where I just made bass lines up.
I mean, out of you mentioned just there about some dance collaborations, and don't forget, obviously, Paul Oakenfold, Massive Attack, David Holmes, and the Orb as well.
Yeah.
Would you single any of those out as particular favourites? Like maybe you spent longer on working with that, or just some magic happened in the studio?
Well, Andy was nice. Andy,
Yeah.
he set me up to play with Primal Scream, and Andy was always very nice and really like Andy was an enthusiast. So it was we had plans. We were going to make an album together.
Mm,
We discussed that, and then I'd already died.
yeah.
So we actually had a long chat about doing a really great sort of massive fuck off dub album. And with all sorts of weird layers it would have had. So yeah, and then he
Mm,
died. So yeah, and Andy was great fun to work with. And
yeah.
with the old actually, as much as it was Alex and Fresh at that time,
Mm,
they're part of the company now. Alex is still the Orb, I think, but Steve Hillage was the producer of that
for
Blue
the
Room.
room, yeah.
Yeah, he was, and he's great. I worked with a couple of albums. I worked on he produced a singer called Rashid Taha, and I played on that. He's a really good producer, and I played with him in Japan in
I've
his band 09 or 07 or something.
I've got some remixes that Justin Robertson did of that artist you've just mentioned, Rashid.
Yeah, yeah, but he was good, Algerian,
Mm,
French Algerian guy, and with Steve, what an interesting guy. Prog rock producing Middle Eastern records, but totally got rave because the hypnotic psychedelic thing.
yeah, I think some of the best dance music is when people look at it with a bigger lens and see the big picture and don't just follow the dance template. Um, I mean, going back to other collaborations, obviously, you've collaborated with Brian Eno, The Edge, did an interesting EP with him and Francois Kevorkian, Bjork, Sinead O'Connor, even Ginger Baker.
Oh, France, yeah, of course, Francois, massive
Yeah.
dance.
So,
Yeah, that was a great album. That was fun.
mm,
So he was a big deal to work with, and I learned a lot from him actually. He was a sort of utilitarian sort of producer coming from the dance background, so everything's kind of put together like parts of a jigsaw puzzle in a way. A little bit different to how other people produce, not quite as organic, but in its own way, very rhythmic based, very much arranged the way you'd arrange a club night, in terms of the arrangement. So that was a
mm.
real eye opener. I really enjoyed that.
I think he's still working now and he makes like sort of YouTube videos.
Yeah, I still hear from it. We've
Yeah.
we've talked a couple of times. I was trying to hook up with him last time not the last time, the time before last, we were in America and I was trying to fit in because I wanted him to meet my band are really good, the Invaders, and I wanted to do some stuff with him. We tried to make it happen, but it was difficult. It didn't quite happen.
Scheduling. I mean, going back to what you were saying about basically the baseline and if Public Image Limited, Pop Tones, Careering, they're all kind of based around the baseline. Do you think that you ever got the acclaim you deserved in a band of larger than life characters like John Lydon or Levine?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I got a little name going there, so I never felt hard done by in that way at all. I think think I got quite a bit of recognition at that time, so that was good. I got frustrated with them because we just weren't working hard enough. We weren't doing enough shows at all, and we weren't. And the record, there was a lot of money wasted, in my view, and others, and business wasn't taken care of. It doesn't matter. It's so long ago now. It's just all a bit of a hoot.
I think it's been written about a lot, hasn't it? And if you Google Jah Wobble interview, you'll see a lot of interviews in Guardian or wherever we're
Yeah,
talking about, and they'll delve into, they don't hide the fact. There was lots of drugs. There was lots of drink. Well, it's not a surprise to anyone. It was the sort
Yeah, it's
of,
kind of rock and roll, I
yeah.
suppose. No. But as I described, it was actually for this avant-garde kind of art band. As much as that was kind of what Peel was, it was quite like Spinal Tap at the time, as it always is for those big rock sort of bands. Actually,
Yeah.
so it was like that. But no, that was I got no regrets with any of it. In essence, the good thing with Lydon at that time, I don't think he's before or since, his lyrics were more like prose, so it was quite unusual. It was quite a primal kind of vibe. It was like Samuel Beckett or something. So it was a bit of existentialist sort of angst. When you think of a lot of the lyrics, there's a sort of real tension there, and there are a lot of the lyrics feel like they're alluding to indicating something else. And Levine, I mean Levine, I spoke at Levine's funeral. I was the last speaker, which was an honour. But he was a really annoying person because he really wound me up because I felt he just wasted his talent.
Right.
As much as I said, well, you fucking idiot. Because he was. You listen to the guitar work on Pop Tones, Public Image itself, and a track like Theme, which is on the first album. It's an amazing sort of guitar sound, an amazing sensibility to it, and he just you know had his issues and didn't develop and do as much as he probably should have done, to be honest. But as I say, things are what they are. So for me, it's all fine. You couldn't go back and change anything anyway, but I probably wouldn't anyway. I'm quite happy the way it all sort of turned out.
It seems, yeah, he seems to have done all right. I mean, I get the impression looking on the releases on, I keep coming back to Discogs, but it is a good database because you can just see what everyone's made, despite it being a consumer platform as well. But I get the impression that maybe you're a bit of a workaholic. Do you just not, do you struggle to just say, right, I'm going to have some time off and go on holiday? Are you always thinking about the next project?
Yeah, I mean, but I really enjoy it. So then again, workaholics probably also that I really enjoy making records. It's easier to make records than it ever was. So we've got yet another record coming out with John Klein, who was guitarist in the Banshees. I run a community project with John in South London. Actually, every couple of weeks we do that. So that keeps me really busy. I essentially tour manage the band. So that's not. I mean, the band are lovely, but we've got to do customs carnets again because you've got, because of Brexit, and you're advised if you travel with a gear, you probably don't need one, but customs can be awkward. On the continent now, you just bet you can meet the wrong kind of guy that thinks I'll show these Brits. So we're back down having to do custom carnets for the first time since like the late 80s, early 90s. So I thought that's annoying having to oversee all that. Is a tremendous. My band are very helpful with all that, but people would be surprised how much of my work activities like that of a clerk.
Do you ever have a problem with getting over to America? They're quite strict, aren't they?
No, I've never had any issues
Uh,
up to this point. In fact, for a while I had an indefinite visa,
hmm.
so which was lovely. And then 9/11 I think changed everything. Obviously the whole thing with the terror thing, and that changed everything, and everything seemed to. It was always pretty stringent American borders. It was never you had to be squeaky clean anyway. But I think now you have to justify and double justify why you should be allowed to have a work visa there to tour. But so you have to get all the right paperwork and letters and proof that you're a viable you are an artist of standing, I suppose.
But, but
But
I suppose as long as you haven't got form for slagging off the current government, then you're probably all right. But people,
yeah, but I mean, my attitude with the politicians, it's just I can't think of a like I think a lot of people feel like this. There isn't a political party or leader that I like at all. You
They're
know.
well, they're not representing you, and you wonder whether who's actually in charge anyway. They're just sort
That's right. Yeah, we're at a
of
time when everything's kind of dissolved, and when that happens, you would, if you read Plato, you read Plato's Republic, as democracies fade and the cycle changes, and they everything that comes together comes apart. They're sort of bound to turn totalitarian. There's no other way for them to go. So I guess we got more of that to come.
yeah.
But I'm old now, so you just try and enjoy the last few sort of years as best you can. But as you get a bit of wisdom, you can see there's actions and there's an inevitable reaction to the action, an inevitable reaction to the action that was inspired by the first action, and everyone's waving their arms and really surprised, and you can see it all unfolding very predictably, basically.
Um, I mean, does that help you having a keen interest on Eastern philosophy in terms of consoling all this conflict that's out there and being able to sort of navigate through that?
I don't like philosophy or religion as a consolation or as some sort of
Um,
salve, as a kind of, it's a great consolation. People say that about, I don't like that particularly. The wisdom should dissolve it all anyway. That once you know, then you start to realize that all phenomena as they arise are impermanent. They all lack an inherent self. And because we make the mistake of clinging to them or thinking they're going to last forever, we suffer, you know. So that's three of the four pillars of Buddhism. So that's some very straight wisdom there immediately. So if you're not looking at the world expecting anything other than change, and if you try and cling to it or solidify it will end in suffering, especially as great empires pass, then, well, you're kind of ahead of the game to start with at that point.
yeah, I certainly do. I'd be interested in reading your autobiography, actually. I think was it 2009 that came out? Dark Lunacy.
Yeah, and then it was reissued. It was republished last year, I think. Actually, at the start of last year
Did you
by
update?
favour.
Did you update some of it for the?
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
Yes, so there was, because prospect, I could feel the blue collar unease. Obviously, both sides of the Atlantic at the time I wrote it, and I wrote the original book, and I discussed that. Obviously, we had Brexit, which I didn't see that coming. So there was a fair bit to kind of write about that.
yeah. So,
But I write with I was it's a bit like we were a roundhead or a cavalier. Well, I was a Remainer, but I've got a lot of sympathy for the remnants, what's left of the working class. Actually, and they're like becoming new sort of untouchables, really. Thatcher kind of hammered them into the ground.
but ironically, they were hoodwinked into being making up a lot of the votes. So they voted for their own demise just through
Yeah, well,
the hype, didn't they?
as much as anything, like it or not, things come down to money. It's like, congratulations, you've just made yourself two or three. It's hard to equate exactly, but a good few grand, I mean, and I would have, maybe I'm naive and probably am. You have to be very careful talking about politics, and too many celebrities and minor celebrities like myself do. But part of the reason we've got a tax shortfall is because we're not getting as much money in revenue from exporting to Europe, I would have thought. But I'm sure somebody would wave a statistic at me, because it's a never-ending war of statistics, isn't it, nowadays?
Uh,
Well, that's not true, actually, because
I,
actually,
I think the benefits are negligible or non-existent. Do you think, then touching on that, do you think there's a danger when being very political as a musician that you are going to end up alienating potential fan base? And then you'll end up just doing a small stage at Glastonbury because everyone thinks you're a.
well, the funny thing is, all the people you look at my old singer Johnny Lydon, he's a big Trump fan, pro Brexit, and he's still plays, So I'm not. I think the fear of cancellation has diminished for a lot of people now,
Mm,
you know. So I don't think they sort of worry so much. But the main thing you see for me as a musician is all this stuff is all that kind of, conditional stuff, politics is all bollocks in a way. It's all just stuff arising and falling. And if you're a musician, you have this direct heart to heart kind of communication. And that's really what you should, and you don't want anything to get in the way of that, you know, so it's preferable really if the person subject A in the front row is getting a wave of bliss from your bass, hopefully. You don't want to put something in their mind, oh, maybe Jah Wobble doesn't agree with me over, you know, some aspect of foreign policy with the government or something. Do you know what I mean?
So
But
you don't necessarily see your role as thinking I'm going to use this as a soapbox to.
oh no, no,
You're
absolutely
more like
no.
primarily let the music be the main focus.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was younger, I was very much to the left, so I was on picket lines at Wapping and all that, and I was, I stopped drinking around that time and drugging, and I just felt actually with the 90s, that was the last time I voted Labour, so that tells you something. That was for John. I would have voted for John Smith. He died. I think voted for Neil Kinnock, and I think we all thought this is now or never, and it looks like we're going to win the election. It was looking like a sure thing, but John Major won it, for the Tories. And you kind of thought, well, you know what, all this is lost. I changed my attitude, whereas I was sort of very angry, leftist kind of guy, yeah, quite rightly in a lot of respects, and I I just had this thing, well, under new management, go out into the world, have a philosophy of taking people at face value, finding what you have in common with people rather than looking for differences, and being of as much help to the world and people as you can be. And the one way not to be helpful is to be having fucking opinions on everything in politics and climate change and
And
you know
everyone's got it now. They've got a social media account. It's given them that sort of so they're
yeah.
entitled to preach, don't they? And then
Well,
obviously,
I've got one or two friends, actually, it's nice, quite nice middle class friends, and they sometimes do work for you, or whatever, with music, and they'll say, "Oh, sorry, I didn't get back to you. I've been so busy," and they're very nice and they're very, very personable, and you think, and I've actually said to a couple, "Yeah, I've seen you on Facebook, kind of really angry, like you fucking bastards," and another thing, they've probably had a couple of glasses of wine too much and venting their spleen, but that to me is not busy, you know. And you sometimes see people are just online all the fucking time, and obviously it's unhealthy, you know.
we have become a bit unplugged or from real life and plugged into the matrix a bit too much, haven't we? But going back to your tour, obviously, if anyone comes out and seeing that, that's the opposite. We will be in the moment, experiencing real music with real musicians. I mean, are you working with any musicians that people watching this might have heard of, or is it quite a kind of
Yeah,
big band?
John Klein. Oh, I've been working with Richard Russell, so the guy who runs Excel. So it's with Sampa. He's got a project. So I've been doing stuff for Excel Recordings, the biggest record company in the world, I
Well,
suppose,
that
aren't
was
they?
Nick Hawk
Successful.
that ran that.
Richard Russell's the owner of
Oh,
Excel.
Fiona, yeah.
Yeah, and I think he's the owner of Beggars Banquet. I think he's like an incredibly successful guy,
Mm.
huge music enthusiast, huge.
I think
So I ended up hanging out with him and just talking about music. He's got a very, very idiosyncratic setup, which I really like the way he records. He's got some old sort of radio amps and all that. It's reminding me a bit of Holger, actually, Holger Zuke, but he's got very imaginative. He produced Gil Scott Heron and all that,
Oh, really? He's probably
Yeah,
one of my
yeah.
favourite artists of all time, actually.
Well, that's right. Yeah, I love Gil Scott
Oh,
Heron, who's, as you know, whose dad played for Celtic. That was
I
something.
didn't know that, but
It's actually true that if Gil Scott Heron's dad played for Celtic. I
unbelievable.
enjoyed people telling me that. People are like, "Oh, fuck off," but he
Yeah,
did. He did.
yeah. Well, he was very, very political.
There's a good documentary on him by um who's the fuck it Don Letts
Oh, was
who
that? Did they
Don did
interview him?
yeah. I mean, Don, that was a good documentary that he did actually on him.
I think I saw it. I may watch it again. He does this sort of like rap poem about some political Reagan-y thing or something. I must watch it again. I'm trying to see where we're going with the questions now because we've gone up here, we've gone there. What can we come back to? You made a really interesting quote in the Guardian. I don't know if you're going to remember this. It was over 10 years ago. They were trying to goad you into whether they wanted you to slag it off or not, or whether they thought you were a fan. They sort of said, "Do you like rock music?" You said you didn't like it, and then you made a sort of analogy about a clock. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, well, that's right. Oh yeah, well I still use it. I used that analogy yesterday. Who
Yeah.
was I talking? I can't. What band was it? Um, I always say about yeah. I can every. I don't generally like rock, and I don't like rock bands, but they've all got a couple of songs like that you like in the way a clock, even a broken clock, is right twice a day. 24 hour, proper old analog clock and rock, but they all do, however bad they are, they've all got a couple of good
Well, yeah,
tunes.
I mean, even everyone slags off Coldplay. Like, I've never seen anyone show as much hate towards a band that's so inoffensive, and maybe that's why they hate them. Even they've got two good songs, but
There you go.
you know,
Yeah.
you have to listen to the albums to find them because often the singles they put out are the ones that are just really kind of wet. But no, I think I agree with you. Everyone's got two. Well, I think you'd struggle to find two good Cheeky Girls songs and two good Venga Boys songs, which
They're
they're
not
not really
rock.
a rock
They're
band,
not
are
rock. They're not rock.
they?
So yeah, that's fine. We're fine. Even the Clash. I wasn't mad on the Clash, but London's Calling and Rock the Casbah, two good numbers. I enjoy those,
Yeah,
especially
yeah, yeah.
London Calling's really exuberant, and the U2. They've got a couple of songs that the one. It's a Beautiful Day. Is it that one?
Yeah, and their early
Bloody
stuff,
Sunday, I think.
yeah, New Year's Day. I mean, their early stuff had a lot of sort of angst and anger and energy that I really like. And I think don't forget the Unforgettable Fire, which Brian Eno produced, which I think is an amazing album. But I'm not the world's biggest U2 fan, but like yourself, there's always some
yeah.
fine. But
And
doing
I work with. So I'm
well.
the only guy to have produced Brian Eno
I
with.
had that as a question because that's
Yeah.
interesting. Is that because he only trusted you, or the experience from working with
No,
put
I
him
think
off?
no, I think he's a funny bloke, and he's talented. Obviously, Brian's talented, and he's and this at heart, he's a nice fella as well. Actually, a lot of the British rock sort of aristocracy are quite public school. They've really got that public school thing about them. So whenever I see people like Boris Johnson, David Cameron, I'm really reminded of people. Like I was in a band, one of the Invaders of the Heart Mark II. We had an old Etonian in it, you know. So and of course Richard Branson was, for all his, was public school. So coming into music, you meet a lot of that, and Brian actually isn't like that, he's, there's a down to earthness about him as well, and I think it was a strange, somebody said to me at the Astoria, we played a show there, and somebody said, "Oh, Brian Eno's here to see you," and I said, "Oh, fuck off," and he said, "No, really, it's Brian Eno." I said, "Oh, fuck off," and then Brian Eno walks in, so he's come to see me and wanted me to. He said he wanted me to produce him, but I thought we'd go from scratch, but no, he gave me like these tiny little snippets of music from something he'd made with Derek Jarman. So it was a funny kind of task to be set, but it worked really well. I had to convince you because it was what I did with it. A lot of this techniques and approach was similar to that was then used a few years later in dance music, with these EQ sweeps on the drum kit and everything, that kind of EQ. So it was sculpturing the stereo, so to speak, affecting the stereo scenes, so it does quite extreme, kind of going behind your head kind of touch. And I think he was slightly shocked, but because it was considered. I've never really discussed this with, but it's quite a fine point with music. It was considered quite naff generally to use effects on drum kits. It was seen as a really naff thing if you were in the studio and you got all the outboard there and you put flanges on a snare or something. It was seen as a bit naff. Someone like Lee Perry, who was a great, he was a real ancestor to dance music, because that it have phased reverb. He would put effects on effects, and it was quite subtle, and he really had his own sound. But it was considered quite naff if you used effects in a certain way. There was a certain aesthetic involved. Even with Peel and Levine, we had that. I don't, have a classic sound. You don't affect it too much. So I think that worried Brian when I did that. But I
Right.
said no. I trust in me. And anyway, it turned out really good. And he remembers my birthday every year. You know.
Oh,
And
that's
he praises the record. He's just very not. It's very, yeah. He's very doesn't need to do that. Just a nice thing to do. So, and I know his brother. I've done sessions with the Orb with Rogerino, and I think Roger was probably quite an influence on Brian.
right.
Roger's really into the stuff I'm into, like Arvo Part and people like that, Gorecki, um, Taverner, that kind of stuff. So I really hit it off with, he really gets it. And I think he's influenced Brian with a lot of the ambient stuff. Eno, out of all, it's no surprise. He's one of my favourite ambient tracks. Is the Ascent from Apollo. I think it must be like a soundtrack for a film that he done with Daniel Lenoir, who I know as well. And I love that track. You know,
I'll have to dig that out. He did make some stuff with Moby as well in the early 90s. That was quite nice as well. What year was that one that you did with Eno then? What's it, early 80s?
95.
Oh, as late as that.
Yeah, 95. So we used like a prototype audio logic setup.
Mm.
It wasn't a huge budget, and so you had to really. I always say it was like, remember that show where it was on the afternoons, daytime TV. You'd have two star chefs with two layman cooks with them, and they were given very very limited menu, like an onion.
Ready, steady, cook.
There you go. There you go.
With Ainsley Harriott.
But the situation with Brian Eno was ready, steady, cook. Right, when you make it, but you got to do it.
Yeah.
There's little snippets of piano from this soundtrack that I did for Derek Jarman, which is like, well, why can't we just go into a studio with no limitation? But of course, he's somebody who I think probably likes reducing choice sometimes, which sometimes isn't. I naturally reduce choice. That's one of the problems we have now is reduced choice. As we all know, start. Can I have a cup of coffee? What do you want? Do you want a latte? Do you want a cappuccino? Just give me a cup of fucking
Yeah,
coffee.
because everyone's got allergies or whatever, but it's
Yeah.
just consumerism, isn't it? But there was an interesting quote on in the Guardian again, coming back to that article, which is a good. I read before this actually, and I was like, damn, I was going to ask that question. So a lot of the questions I was going to ask were already in that article, but I thought we'll recycle some of them. But you'd made a quote about he'd said someone sent you a fax or something that said, "I want you to do this," and you
Oh
said,
no,
"Oh,
no. What he said was he did a fax and it was public. I didn't know that he created a journal that was released of all his stuff.
oh,
But
okay,"
I didn't know that was going to happen. So he sent me a fax. I want you to treat me more like a Moorish maiden.
whatever that means.
Yeah, whatever that meant. Well, I think what that to me means is, well, I'm, got such a refined aesthetic and, and this is, a bit too crude or something. And so I'm bright enough at the time to sort of see, sometimes you have angles like that with producers or film directors. There's sometimes they've got to be like interior designers and convince everyone else they've got the best taste in the room. I always think, is it Lawrence Llewellyn Bowen, that sort of person? Is that right? Is that
Yeah, with
someone
the
on telly?
cuffs, you
Yeah,
know.
he's got long hair. He's got long
Yeah,
hair,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, that kind of vibe. Like you see those guys on telly, and their shtick. It's not far removed from a lot of producers. I hear myself doing it. When I'm up talking about production. That of course what I always do in these situations. So I'm as full of shit as anybody. Don't worry about that. And I can hear myself. But of course, when I work with Holger, and Holger Zukai and all that, but I just rather than deal with that. I was really busy at the time because we were touring. There was a load of stuff going on. So I said, look, we'll just have a meet. So I just thought I'm going to cut through it, look him in the eye. So rather than have a fey exchange of emails, it's just like, look, I don't do that, like it's a show. In a way, it's quite Victorian. I suppose it's like that charming letter writing that people would have done, at
Yeah,
once.
you get those classic letter exchange between Eric Clapton and George Harrison's wife and things like that.
Oh, really? Oh,
Becoming
right.
part of rock and roll folklore now, haven't they?
Yeah, well, all this it was letter writing. If you, on the you hear things like on the Western frontier in America, people writing long letters back home to England, or and there's a great romanticism attached to it. And sometimes, yeah, with that, I'm very short. Sometimes it's a bit like I ain't got time for that, which is a bit horrible in a way.
Well,
But
no,
at the time, I was really because I was running the band, so it was like let's have a meet. And he said to me, "Right, Joe, I think he said, do you like it? Do you think it's finished? Do you believe?" I said, "Yeah, I believe in it. I think it's great. It's really." And I'm double proud I stuck to my guns because I didn't hear it for a little while, and it got re-released, and it sold really well. It was received really well, and I heard it and thought, God, I wonder if I'm going to hear it as when I hear some of my stuff from the 80s, and you think, oh,
mm.
fucking hell, listen to that drum sound. Yeah, it's like fucking boxes being hit. And actually, it was like, wow, this sounds fantastic.
Mm.
It's really stood up well. So, yeah, it
What's
was
the
good. It
name?
all worked out.
What's the name of the album? I'm going to check it.
Spinner.
Spin. I'm going to track it down later. I mean, I hope that your PR company doesn't tell me off for not talking enough about your current lineup and Invaders of the Heart because I hope it doesn't, but I just think there's so much interesting stuff to talk about
Oh,
from a
that's look.
massive
It's
career.
enough for me. It's enough for me to just the proof of the pudding's in the eating. My band is fantastic. I played with them for 15 years now,
Mm,
so I'm not just saying that. They're really good lads, all from up north. They're really good players. So if you come, it's an entertaining show with some astonishing musicianship. They're really good players, and I know what I'm talking about. I play with a lot of people. That's all we need to say, I think.
yeah, and I think I too because I don't believe in overselling stuff, and if people want to come, they want to come. But I think yeah, it is worth touching on.
If you come, and you kind of half and half. If you come, you'll really enjoy it because
Mm,
you'll really like there's some astounding bits in it, and where the Shakespeare comes in is I do the opening act to Richard III before Pop Tones,
okay.
which is quite funny because two of the band are from Yorkshire, one from Oldham across the Pennines. So obviously Richard III, War of the Roses. So we have a little spiel about that, and a bit of tension creeps in on stage as the two rival camps, eye each other up. But anyway, that's where that comes in. And of course, that was, I think, that was the whole kind of thing with Pill back at the beginning. Part of John, I think, had been somebody I'd seen somebody say he'd been influenced, maybe at school or something, with Richard III. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but I don't think so. And it kind of made sense to me. That was part of that kind of persona. It kind of goes with Peel somehow, and it goes with the territory. Do you know what I mean? And that his persona then was a sort of a bit of that, a bit of Anthony Newley, a bit of Bowie, a bit of
If you
you know,
asked
so,
him,
and a bit of Ian Jury, you
if
know,
if you asked
which is
him,
a heady brew, by the way. So it's not criticizing. It's a smart. You amalgamate this stuff, and of course bring yourself to the table as well. But at the time, I used to think we should do that more somehow. That bring that angle to it more. And so now with my solo thing, I can bring that angle that in a playful way. I hasten to add, where you bring a bit of that because you're part of all these lineages. And one of the lineages that is very evident for me on stage is the music hall, and that's there with me. It's a bit of raconteur, there's some stand up. You're a bit of you're a bit of a showman, so you got that, but you've also got all sorts of lineages, and one being English sort of lineage, Blake, nonconformist. The whole thing of English theatre. Um, uh, uh, all these lineages come to the fore, so it's a very affectionate nod to Shakespeare and to English culture, because there is such a thing. I think we're told there isn't, but we've got such rich culture here. Yeah, there's obviously Blakey and Blake. made an album based on Blake. So
Yeah, it's about the tiger.
I I think I'm going to have to go because I've got another one at 3:30. Is that all right with you? Sorry.
That's fine. I only had one. I was going to pull you up on a lighter tone. In the Guardian piece, which I keep coming back to, you said you'd heard the Egyptian singer, and I can't pronounce it. Called
Onkerson.
Yeah, on shortwave radio. It sounded like it was coming from another universe, far more romantic and erotic than someone revealing their breasts on a beach in Torquay. Well, I'm from Torquay. Just want to ask you, what's wrong with Torquay and what's wrong with breasts?
Yeah, well, that's quite a funny thing to say. I can't remember saying that. My God,
It's
but
just a
no,
flipping thing you come up with.
nothing wrong with Torquay. I don't know why, but Helen Chamberlain comes to mind, who
Well,
used to do
right.
the
Yeah.
Soccer AM. She's a Torquay fan,
Yes, she is.
and
Not a lot of
and
people.
my good friend Andy Perry from Mojo, that's also a Torquay fan.
Yeah. No, I was just, it was a light-hearted thing. I didn't
I
take
know.
offense. There's
Yeah.
far worse things you could have said. You're not coming to talk anyway, but you are coming to Exeter. And I'll be seeing you Exeter Cabin on Wednesday, the 5th of November. Hopefully, some of the people watching this will also come. If they can't come to that, they could come to one of the other two Southwest shows, Bideford Palladium, 7th of November, Truro Old Bakery, 8th of November. Been great talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks very much, and please come and say hello.
I will
Cheers,
do.
mate.
If I get a
Thank
chance,
you.
if I can make it through your security.
Thank you very much. Ian's phoning me. I better go.
Yeah, no,
Tell me
absolutely.
off.
Thanks for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thanks so much.